Hello and welcome back to Biological Fitness. So we got another great class for you today. We're going to be looking at one of the real classics in the Feldenkrais archives. I think you're going to find this is an extremely powerful lesson, something that you can come back to again and again. We're going to be working with the pelvis. So this is the center of your body. This is the center of your power. And so just developing a little more facility with the movements of the pelvis is going to really help you clarify the hip joints, and it's going to have a general positive effect throughout your whole body. Now, we talked about this last time, and it's important to understand that a lot of the directions, although I will keep asking you to do this and do that with your pelvis, really the whole body is involved in every movement. And to begin with, the connection you're going to want to really get clear on in the first part of the process is the relationship between your pelvis and your head. And of course, that's a relationship that passes along the length of your spine. So that'll be part of our focus in the beginning. And I just want to mention a particular idea from Moshe Feldenkrais that this lesson really exemplifies. So what is good posture? Well, you've probably heard a lot of different formulas for how you should stand, how you are supposed to line up your head, your shoulders, your hips, all the rest. But Feldenkrais had a very different take on posture. In fact, he kind of made fun of the word posture. He once said, posture is for posts, but humans need something a little more active. And he coined a different word, acture. So it's kind of a funny word, but it's a play on the word action. And for Feldenkrais, the idea of having good posture had more to do with something like poise or readiness. So the way he put it, good posture is the ability to move in any direction at any time without preparation or hesitation. So if you just imagine that you were walking down the street and suddenly there's a pothole underfoot, can you step around it and stay balanced? Or this is a kind of a silly example, but one I like to use. Imagine you're sitting in a chair and you're surrounded on all sides by people with rotten tomatoes, and they start throwing tomatoes at you one after another. They're coming from the left, they're coming from the right. Well, are you able to dodge? Are you able to get away from each of those flying tomatoes so it doesn't hit you? And if you can do that, and if you're sitting in the chair, you're going to have to be dancing in your chair, and your pelvis is going to be rolling forward, back, left, and right, and all kinds of different directions on the chair to help you do that. So we're not going to do it that way today, but we are going to explore some very specific movements of the pelvis and essentially practice moving it all around the circle, all around the 360 degrees. But we're going to build up to that little by little. And a thing that I also want to say here at the beginning is, while you're going to be asked for some precision in this process, that doesn't mean that mistakes are a problem. Mistakes are actually a really important part of the learning process. They will highlight for you where in your body you have less clarity, and you'll have the opportunity to work with those areas a little more specifically to gain more mobility, smoother, more efficient movement. So as always, if you find that you're straining during the lesson, please dial back your effort, take an extra rest. It's not that important. If you just follow along with the process without, using willpower to achieve something, because really following the directions is no particular achievement, right? So if you run into some challenge, just go easy. And what I can tell you is if you take that approach, just following along and doing your best, you're going to have a really great result from this process. Okay, so this is a lesson that we're going to do lying on the back on the floor, although there may be a little bit of sitting up that will be involved. So make sure you have everything set up on the floor to begin. And if you've been following along so far, you know how I like to begin. So I'm going to invite you to begin by standing. Now, as you stand, just slowly move your attention from your feet and the way they connect with the floor, and then move your attention slowly upwards through your body. Just try to get an overall sense of how the bones of your skeleton are stacked up one on top of the other. When you come to your pelvis, just notice, does it seem that the pelvis sits more over one leg or the other? If you gently rest your hands on the outside of your pelvis on each side, do you notice that one side of the pelvis is a little higher off the floor than the other? Or does it seem like the pelvis is actually slightly turned to the left or the right? Okay, let your arms hang, but continue to move your attention upward, sensing your spine, your chest, your shoulders. Notice, is one shoulder a little further forward or further back compared to the other? And does it seem like one shoulder is higher or lower in relation to the ceiling and the floor? You can also notice where each of your hands hangs next to your legs. Maybe one is a little further forward or back. Maybe one hand touches the leg, or maybe there's space there. And now just begin to look all around the room. So turn your head and your eyes in order to see up, down, left, right, any direction you can think of. Let your whole body follow your gaze. So the shoulders can move, the pelvis can move, you can even bend your knees if you like, or you can change the shape of your spine. But if you're curious to see the place where the walls meet the ceiling in one corner, or where they meet the floor in another corner of the room, where can you go easily? Now, just one constraint, keep your feet planted. If you like, you can maybe widen the feet if that feels more stable. But just notice, where can you shift and turn to and feel that you're still balanced? And notice the movement of your pelvis. Notice, where does the pubic bone point to between your legs as you look here and look there? Okay, so that's an idea we can come back to later. And now, before you get on the floor, just take a bit of a walk around the room. And as you walk, pay attention to the area of your hip joints. That's close into the midline, the area of your groin. And just see, what kind of sensation do you get? Do you really sense how the pelvis sits on top of the ball of the femur of each leg as you walk? Or Maybe it's not so distinct. Just find out how it is now. And then please come down to the floor and rest on your back. And as you probably know by now, at the beginning of each awareness through movement lesson, what we like to do is something we call a body scan, to just observe yourself on the floor, to notice different relationships. But we're going to do it slightly differently this time than what we often do. So I'm going to invite you to have the legs long if that's comfortable. If not, you can stand the feet. But I'm going to give these directions as if the legs are long, then you'll be fine if you need to stand the feet. But then also, instead of having your arms along your sides, could you put them out at shoulder height on the floor, out to each side? And then if it's comfortable for you, even take the arms a little higher up the floor above your head, so that between your arms and your legs, you have more or less kind of an X shape. Okay, it doesn't have to be exact. And again, make sure it's comfortable for you. And now notice your right wrist. Just imagine the space inside the wrist there. And then shift your attention over to your left wrist. And now imagine a line that connects the wrists, but it's not a straight line, but it's an arc that goes on the floor up over your head. So just imagine as if someone was painting that line on the floor from one wrist, let's say from the left wrist up over your head and down to the right wrist. Feel your right wrist again, and now feel your right ankle. And then imagine that arcing line, it continues from your right wrist down to your right ankle. And it's going to keep going all the way around you in a circle. So it passes from your right ankle to your left ankle. And then it comes up the floor again to your left wrist. Just imagine a couple of cycles of movement around that circle. And now that you understand what we're doing, maybe you slightly adjust the position of your legs or your arms to make it feel a little closer to a circle, but it doesn't have to be perfect. But feel the sensation of your attention moving in that circle. And you can have your eyes closed for this, but you might even notice that your eyes begin to follow this line. Okay, leave that alone for a moment and just continue resting. Feel your breath coming and going. And now we're going to draw a second circle, but it's closer in. So draw a circle that begins with your right elbow. And then it arcs over to your left elbow. Now, would that line pass through your head? Would it pass above your head? No right or wrong again, but try to sense where that line would go. And then from the elbow, go down to the knee. And then from one knee to the other and up to the other elbow. So this is a smaller circle than the first one, and it connects between your elbows and your knees, going all the way around. And again, notice if your eyes are involved as you follow the drawing of this line. Okay, and leave that alone. And now an even smaller circle. Imagine a line that begins with your left shoulder. And then it arcs over to the right shoulder. And this time I think it's safe to say it would probably pass somewhere inside your neck or your throat. You get a sense of that. And then think that the line comes down from one shoulder to the hip joint on that side and passes through the other hip joint and back up to the shoulder on the other side. So this is the smallest of the three circles, and it passes through the shoulders and the hip joints. And now stay with this circle, but change the direction of movement. So if you were imagining it going clockwise, now change it to counterclockwise. And then imagine that you're moving around the middle circle again between the elbows and the knees. And then the outermost circle that passes through the wrists and the ankles. Okay, very nice. Let that all go. And if you like, you can bring your arms down to your side now. Just notice if that imaginary drawing of those three circles created a new sense of how you find yourself in the space and how you rest on the floor. Now, please bend your knees and stand your feet, have them about shoulder width apart. And bring your attention to the contact between the back of your pelvis and the floor. And take your hands and actually place them on the front of your pelvis for a moment. So feel the large bones on the outsides, the iliac crests. And then use your two hands to begin to move down and in to find the pubic bone. And just very gently move your hands back and forth between the outer ridge of the pelvis and down to the pubic bone. And then come around the outside pelvis and then feel towards the back of the pelvis, close to the floor. You can roll the pelvis a little to one side to feel one side of your sacrum, and then roll it to the other side to feel the other side. And then take your arms out. Bring your attention again to your pubic bone. And now begin to make a movement where you reach your pubic bone down and away from your head. It doesn't have to be a large movement. And after you do that, you allow the pelvis to roll back up the floor. So this is a movement of rolling the pelvis down away from your head in the direction of your feet. But imagine that you'll lead the movement with your pubic bone. Each time you make the movement, I'll suggest you make the movement as you breathe out. And have the sense that your belly is very open. Okay, pause for a moment. And in fact, try a different approach this time of just simply breathing in as if you were breathing down into the bottom of your pelvis. So again, expand the belly, but this time you're not thinking so much of rolling the pelvis, but you may find that the expansion of the belly causes the pelvis to roll. And so again, you can begin to marry that movement to the reaching of the pubic bone down and away from the head. And feel your feet on the floor. And you can imagine that with your legs, you help the movement by, it's almost as if your heels are pulling your pelvis down. The backs of your knees close a little bit every time the pelvis rolls downwards. And what's going on above your pelvis? So as much as you can, soften the chest, and every time the pelvis rolls down the floor, can you allow the chin to move down towards your chest? You can lower your eyes as if you were looking down towards your belly. Okay, leave that alone. Take a rest for a moment. Just keep your feet standing. And now roll your pelvis in the other direction, up towards your head. No need to make a large movement here. You roll the pelvis up the floor and then you let it return to the starting position. With this movement as well, do you feel how it reverberates up your spine? So every time the pelvis moves up the floor, you can allow your head to tilt a little back and the chin moves up away from the chest. Okay, and leave that alone now. Become aware of the coming and going of your breath again. And now as you breathe in, you make one of those movements with the pelvis, and as you breathe out, you make the other movement. So in other words, you rock the pelvis up and down the floor, and you synchronize those movements with the breathing in and the breathing out. And I didn't say which direction you go when you inhale, which direction you go when you exhale. So just notice what you chose. Keep the range of movement comfortable for you. Get an overall sense of how much work are you doing here. And be clear on the coordination you chose. So now you can pause, and when you begin again, you change the coordination. You take the pelvis in the opposite direction as what you did before on the inhale, the opposite direction of what you did before on the exhale. And notice if this feels simpler or if it feels like suddenly you're doing more work. If it does feel like more work, just reduce the size of the movement. So when you compare two movements, if you want to know which one is more efficient, the thing to do is not to try to make each version of the movement the same size, but rather to keep the level of effort equal. And then maybe you find in one situation there's less of a result for the same effort, but that's fine. But this is the opposite of the habit that so many of us have of just turning up the volume, working harder every time we meet a challenge. We're going to try to let go of that habit here, at least for the next half hour or so as we go through this process. Okay, leave everything alone and rest. You can lengthen your legs on the floor. Just notice if your back is resting a little differently from when you began. Stand your feet again. And now very slowly tilt one knee out to the side so that you can draw your foot up the floor and then the other, so that you bring the soles of your feet together. The knees are out to the side and soles of your feet are touching. Now, if for any reason this is difficult for you, you have a couple of options. You could grab a pillow and place it underneath the knee on each side, or you can simply do what we were doing before. You can keep the feet standing. So we'll be using this position of the soles of the feet together during this process, but if it doesn't work for you, you can stick with the feet standing. Okay, but in this new position, just appreciate that the angle that your legs, the angle of your legs up into your pelvis is different. And now begin to make that same movement with your pelvis, moving up and down the floor. And you'll feel it's a very different sensation here. As the pelvis moves down, allow the belly to be expanded. And the idea is, as much as possible, you're really making the movement from right in the area of your groin. You might have a little bit of a sense of pushing and pulling the floor with the outside of your feet. Really look for the movement right in and around the pelvis. And look for the movement to travel up and down the spine. The head moves up and down the floor, just as the pelvis does. Okay, and let that go. Stand your feet again. Just rest here. As you rest, you can softly roll your head a little to one side and then to the other. And then roll all the way to your side so that you can come up into a sitting position on the floor. And as you sit, again, bring the soles of your feet together, and then you can lean on your hands behind you. Have your fingers pointing forward. And just figure out how far behind you do you want to have your hands. And now you probably find that you might be a little bit rounded here, and that's fine for the time being. And in fact, I'm going to invite you to round a little more. So now lower your head as if to look down towards your belly. Let yourself round. Soften the chest and feel when you do this that the pelvis rolls backwards. And then bring your head back up onto the horizon, feeling that you also lift your chest. And here you can push the belly out just a little bit. And then again, lower the head, round the spine. As you do this, and then you come forward, pushing the belly out, bringing your eyes back up to the horizon. As you do this, just notice if you're bringing a lot of weight into your hands and your arms. Well, first of all, you can always come forward and maybe just sit cross-legged. You can take a rest at any time and take the weight off your arms. But if you really find the nice movement through the length of your spine, as you lower your head, the middle of your back goes further backwards. And you can create a kind of counterbalance where you shouldn't feel like you're falling into your arms. They're there to support you. And likewise, when you come forward, it's not just by pushing with your arms, but that movement of expanding the belly and moving the pubic bone down towards the floor is very important here. Okay. Come back down onto your back and rest on your back. And then bend your knees and stand your feet. And just go back to this same movement of rocking the pelvis up and down the floor. But see if this is becoming a little more fluid for you now. Feel when you create a little space in the low back, and when does the low back press backwards towards the floor. And likewise, when is there more space behind your neck? And when does the neck move backwards towards the floor? Since you feel the pressure move up and down the back of your pelvis, also track the movement of pressure up and down the back of your head. Okay, very nice. Take a rest. And once again, bring the soles of your feet together. And now bring your attention to your knees and just notice that there's some distance probably between your knees and the floor. And can you now lift your knees just a little bit higher and then allow them to move back towards the floor again? Lift them and lower them. It's kind of like a bird flapping its wings. And as the knees go towards and away from the floor, what begins to happen with your pelvis? You feel that the pelvis is already beginning to move up and down the floor. And notice the coordination here. When the knees go away from the floor, what direction does the pelvis go? And when the knees come back towards the floor, what direction does it go? Okay, that can be a lot of work, so just put your feet standing for a moment so you can rest. And let me emphasize that throughout the process, you can always rest at any time. So if the number of movements or the amount of time that I'm giving for a particular movement variation, it seems like more than you want to do right now, just go ahead and add in your own rests whenever you need them. Okay, so sometimes you can just do 2 or 3 movements is enough. But now bring the soles of the feet together again and resume this movement of taking the knees towards and away from the floor, and feel again, what does the pelvis do? And now can you pause and then reinitiate the movement so that the pelvis goes in the opposite direction as what it did before when you lift the knees. And it goes in the opposite direction as what you did before when the knees move back towards the floor. You might find this is awkward for you at first. So just play with it. Whenever a movement is a little unusual, one of the things that we tend to do is hold the breath. So make sure that the breath is flowing, the chest is soft. And just see if you can, even just for a movement or two, if you can find both of the possible coordinations of the pelvis with the movement of the knees. Okay, very nice. Leave that alone. You can lengthen your legs on the floor, take a complete rest. And now just roll your right leg a little in and out. Just roll it over the heel so the outside of the foot comes a little towards the floor and then the inside. And see how distinct is the feeling of movement in your right hip joint. Okay, rest that leg and then do the same thing with your left leg. Roll it a little in and a little out. And now roll both legs, once towards each other and once rolling away from each other, in and out. The knees may slightly bend as the legs roll to the outside. Great. Okay. And now bend your knees and stand your feet. And now we're going to begin to move in a different direction. So have the feet, again, about shoulder width or maybe even a little bit wider. And now lift the left hip joint a little bit higher so that the pelvis rolls to the right. And then bring the left hip back down towards the floor. And do that a number of times. Now, as you're doing this, what's happening with your knees? Are you also tilting your knees to the right? So let's say that you can tilt the right knee to the right. Tilt the right knee to the right, and you'll find that'll invite the pelvis to roll and then bring it back to point at the ceiling. But see if you can keep the left knee always to the ceiling. Now, the movement of the pelvis in the other leg may pull on the left leg, so you're going to have to find a kind of engagement. But do your best to keep the left knee to the ceiling. And then maybe after a few movements, you can also keep the right knee to the ceiling. And you just roll the pelvis between the two legs. Every time the pelvis rolls to the right, you'll feel that at the top of your left leg, there's a sense of opening in the front of the left hip. Okay, it could be that your knees are still tilting to the side. That's okay. Take a rest. And then begin to lift the right hip so that the pelvis rolls to the left. Try for a couple movements to see if you can do it with both knees to the ceiling. But if not, allow the left knee to open a little bit out to the left each time and then bring it back to the ceiling. But do your best to keep the right knee to the ceiling. And then lift the left hip to roll the pelvis to the right, and then lift the right hip to roll the pelvis to the left. So imagine you have a plate of spaghetti balanced on each knee. One key thing here is to make sure that the outer edge of each foot stays connected to the ground, because the moment you're tilting the knees, you're probably rolling over your feet. So as the pelvis goes to the right, really stay connected to the outer edge of your left foot. As the pelvis goes to the left, stay connected to the outer edge of your right foot. And the movement of the pelvis doesn't have to be a lot. Take a rest now. And also just ask yourself, what else was moving? So come back to the movement again. Roll the pelvis a little left and a little right, but feel, how does this movement pass up? Further up into your spine, into your chest. You could begin rolling your head along with the pelvis. And if you're rolling your head in the same direction of the pelvis, now you could pause and you can roll your head opposite. Just go gently here. Very nice. Take a rest. And now, as you've done before, take your knees out to the side and bring the soles of your feet together. And find out, what's it like here to rock the pelvis from side to side. And now you probably will find that one knee goes towards the floor and the other one lifts. But think that the movement is created from the pelvis. Okay, and let that go. Take a complete rest on your back. And now bend your knees, stand your feet, roll to one side and come up to sit again. As you did before, you're going to bring the soles of the feet together. You're going to lean on your hands behind you, with the fingers pointing forward. And by the way, having the hands in that position, it allows the elbows to bend if they need to. And do what you did earlier. Lower your head and round your back, and the elbows may in fact bend here. Pelvis rolls backwards, and then as you lift your head and your chest and you come forward again, you push out the belly. And you might feel that when you come forward, the shoulder blades can come a little towards each other in the back. And then as you round yourself and lower the head again, the shoulder blades widen. Just really bring your attention all along the length of your spine. Notice if there's any place that isn't participating in the movement. You don't need to do this quickly. Take your time. Okay. And now pause and sitting. If you like, you can change the position of your feet just for resting. And then come back to that position, the soles of the feet together, the hands behind. And now turn your head and your chest so you're facing towards the left knee. And make the same kind of movement you were doing on this diagonal. So you could be looking out past the knee, and then it's like you look down at your knee, and then you look along your thigh until you're looking at your belly, and you're rounded, and your weight you'll feel has gone back on the right side of your pelvis. And then look from your belly out to your knee and up towards the horizon again, coming forward. Make a few movements like this. Again, try to minimize the action of your arms. They play a role, but you're looking for a sense of the pelvis almost gripping the floor below. The reaching of the pubic bone down as you come forward. Okay. And take another rest. And then turn yourself so that you're facing your right knee and try the same idea. Rounding yourself to look down towards the right knee, along the thigh and to your belly. And then coming forward as your eyes track forward from the belly out to the knee and then up to the horizon, off to the right. Again, just monitor your own comfort here. If you need rests, you can take rests. But when you're ready to continue, now you look out to the horizon over your right knee, and then you come down, rounding yourself. And then when you're looking at your belly, you turn a little bit, and then you look out along the left leg to the left knee and up to the horizon. And then round yourself and go through the middle and come forward again to the right. So your head does a kind of a sweeping arc. It's like the bottom half of a circle or the letter U, something like that. And feel the arc that your pelvis is drawing on the floor. Okay. And now come back down and rest on your back. So it's a bit more work to do that in the upright position, but see if after having done so, you have a new connection to the floor. Now bend your knees and stand your feet. And now imagine the back of your pelvis against the floor, and imagine that on the floor is a clock. One of those old-fashioned clocks with the 12 numbers all the way around, right? And so if you revisit the movement that you've done many times of rolling your pelvis up in the direction of your head and then down towards your feet, feeling movement travel all along your spine, what we could imagine is when you're moving up, you're moving towards the 12 on the clock. And when the pelvis goes down towards the feet, it's reaching down towards the 6. And now rest the pelvis. And where you find your pelvis at rest, that's the middle of the clock. Okay. But now roll your pelvis so that it comes up to rest on the 12 and keep it there. And think about the other hours on the clock. The 3 would be on the left and the 9 would be over on the right. So with the pelvis at 12, now move the pelvis down a little to the left to 1 o'clock and then back to 12. So it's not a large movement, but it's also moving along an arc. So move back and forth between 12 and 1. Just notice probably you're engaging more with the right leg here. And feel how the movement also involves your spine. And then move from 12 to 1 to 2 o'clock. And from 2 o'clock to 1 o'clock and back to 12. Keep doing that for a few more movements. And then add 3 o'clock so that you have a quarter arc and move from 12 to 1 to 2 to 3 and 3 to 2 to 1 to 12. At any point, you can let the pelvis come back to the middle of the clock to rest. And if you're up for it, just make a few more movements and really be sure you know when you're on each hour and that you're staying on that arc, that you're not cutting a corner. Okay, leave that alone, rest your pelvis now. And then again, have the feet standing, and this time reach the pelvis down to 6 o'clock. And then from 6 o'clock, move to the left and a little up to 5 o'clock. And then from 5 back to 6. So just like you did on the top of the clock, you're going to slowly draw this arc, but adding 1 more hour at a time. So after a few movements, go from 6 to 5 to 4, and then 4 to 5 to 6. And then eventually from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3. And 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you're finding that it is hard to bring your pelvis to one of the hours of the clock, one of the things that you could do is just imagine that the clock is a bit smaller. So from the middle of the clock down to 6 doesn't have to be, it could be a shorter distance, and then the whole clock is smaller and the hours are more within reach. It's not important how large the movements are here. What you're after is a very smooth arcing movement. And now include the entire left side of the clock. But try to go gradually enough and be precise enough that, again, you know which hour you're on. take a rest now. If you like, this might be a good moment to lengthen your legs on the floor and feel the left side of your back compared to the right side. How do you rest after these much more specific movements going around the clock on the left side? Roll your head a little left and right and see how's that. Okay, and then bend your knees, stand your feet. And we'll begin to investigate the right side of the clock. So roll the pelvis up to 12. And this time move to the right to 11 o'clock. Back to 12. Make 2 or 3 movements like that. You feel this is a different engagement. Left leg becomes a little more prominent in the movement. Go from 12 to 11 to 10. 10, 11, 12, and then 12, 11, 10, and 9. And then arc back up to 12. As always, use your breath to help you smooth out the movement. So keep going back and forth here, making it smoother and smoother. Okay, and take a rest. And then, of course, roll the pelvis down to 6 o'clock, and you have that last quarter of the clock between 6 and 7, and then eventually 8 and 9. Take your time with the movements, going gradually. And notice, by the way, is your head moving? Remember all those movements of going up and down and your head was rocking up and down? So as you draw an arc with your pelvis, you might be tracing a similar arc with the back of your head. As you go all the way around the right side of the clock now, be deliberate to include your head. You can think of drawing a circle, or a half circle rather at this point, with your nose. Go all the way around the right side of the clock, from the top to the bottom, bottom to the top. But again, notice if there are any particular hours that you struggle to get to. Okay, take a rest now. Now bend your knees and stand your feet. And you're going to traverse all the way around the clock. But go slowly in the beginning. Again, try to be precise here and notice as you go around, where do you get stuck? That's an important piece of information. So, for example, if you found that 4 o'clock wasn't so smooth, if something was going on, you might want to spend a little time just going between 4 and 5 and 4 and 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, just going back and forth over any area of the clock that feels a little less than smooth. Whichever direction you're going now, change directions. Again, feel that the chest can be soft, the ribs can move. And the head is moving with the pelvis. So as you continue to make these movements, you might remember how you began, this idea of these circles on the floor. Imagine that your eyes are traveling around the room in a circle, following the movement of the pelvis. Okay, leave it alone, take a rest. And you might decide that this is enough. This might be all you need to do today. I'm just going to invite a couple more variations if you're feeling up to it. And if not, you just rest. But what could be interesting now is to find out, what does it feel like to make the clock with the soles of the feet together, as you were doing earlier? So just begin in the middle and then roll maybe down to 6. And come up one side and down the other. Feel, does your breastbone know about the movement you're making with your pelvis? Again, include the head and the eyes. Crucial to include the head and the eyes. Change the direction. Very nice. And then take another rest. And now one more option. Roll to your side and come up into sitting one last time. Soles of the feet together. Resting with your arms behind you, hands pointing forward, fingers pointing forward. And now begin as you did before by lowering your head, rounding your back, and then with your eyes move out to look towards your right knee and up. And then this time look further up towards the ceiling and then bring your eyes down to the other side, to your left knee, and then back to looking at your belly as you round yourself. And so as you go around, you'll see you're drawing a circle in the air with your nose. And the whole spine can get into the action. When the pelvis is at 6 o'clock, that's when you're the furthest forward. And the belly is full. And then when you're at 12 o'clock, that's when you're the furthest back and the head is down. And change directions. Looking up over one knee, up towards the ceiling and arcing down the other way. Very nice. Come back down and rest one last time on the floor. And just know that this is a process that you can really play with. It doesn't matter how many times. You will always get benefit from exploring the pelvic clock. So if there was something that felt like it still was there to be improved, you can celebrate that. And you can come back again another day. But for now, bend your knees, stand your feet. Roll to your side and come up to stand again. Do you remember what you did in the beginning? Just begin to look everywhere in your room. Look up, look down, look over your shoulder. But really feel now how there's a connection between where your eyes are looking and how your pelvis can move over the top of your legs. And again, you can bend your knees or you can bring one shoulder forward or back. If you want, you can even raise your arms up into the air and begin to reach here and there. Just explore a little free-form movement here at the end of the process. Just have a little fun. Playful. And then, of course, just take a walk through the room. Feel the action in your hip joints after your practice today. And we'll end right here. So look forward to seeing you next time for some more biological fitness. Take care, everyone.